Chosen one. There are moments in life that do not look dramatic from the outside, and yet they hit the soul like a brick dropped through glass. This is one of them. It is early in the morning. The house is still quiet. The coffee has gone lukewarm before you even took a second sip, and your phone is in your hand because you needed to check the bank account before the day got moving. Before work, before church, before the grocery store, before another round of pretending everything is under control. Then you see the number, and your stomach turns. Your chest tightens. Your mind starts moving faster than your spirit can keep up. Groceries, power bill, prescription refill, gas tank, insurance payment. Maybe your grown son needs help again. Maybe your daughter is doing her best but still came up short this month. Maybe a grandchild needs school supplies, shoes, lunch money. Something small to the world, but not small when every dollar already has a name. And just like that, the whole room changes. The kitchen is the same kitchen, the same table, the same morning light coming through the blinds. But inside you, it feels like the floor shifted. And that is why I need to tell you this right now. What made your face fall was not hidden from God. He saw that wave of sickness. He saw the prayer you did not fully say. He saw you standing there trying not to unravel before 8 in the morning. So before we go any further, if this message is speaking directly to where you are living right now, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and write, "God is making a way" in the comments. Not because those words solve everything in 1 second, but because sometimes faith begins by agreeing with heaven before your circumstances have caught up. And the reason that moment felt so heavy is because, for people in this season of life, a low number in the account is never just a low number. It reaches back into years of carrying things, years of figuring it out, years of surviving layoffs, surprise repairs, hospital bills, rising prices, family emergencies, and all the ordinary American burdens that pile up quietly until even a strong person begins to feel worn thin around the edges. At 45, 52, 60, 65, you have lived enough life to know that one number can trigger 10 memories. It can bring back the time the hours got cut, the season the company downsized, the months when you put groceries on a credit card and told yourself you would catch up later, the years you worked hard, showed up, stayed responsible, paid what you could, did without what you wanted, and still, somehow, ended up staring at a balance that makes you feel like maybe you failed. And that is where this pain gets deeply personal, because many decent, hard-working people do not just see a financial problem in that moment. They see an accusation. They start thinking, I should have been further ahead by now. I should have had more saved. I should not still be this stressed at my age. I should not still be doing this kind of math in my own kitchen. But the truth is, chosen one, this pain is not greed. It is not vanity. It is not some shallow craving for luxury. It is the fear of not being able to breathe. It is the fear of having responsibilities and not enough margin. It is the fear of one more thing going wrong when you are already holding too much together with too little. It is the ache of wanting simple stability in a world where eggs cost more, copays add up, the water heater breaks at the worst possible time, and the check that once stretched a little now feels like it disappears before the week is over. So when your body reacted, when your stomach dropped, when your spirit felt bruised by what you saw, that was not weakness. That was the human cost of carrying too much pressure for too long. And because the burden is so heavy, many people learn to hide it so well that even the people sitting next to them in church would never guess what is happening behind their smile. That is part of what makes money pain so isolating. People will talk more openly about arthritis, high blood pressure, or trouble sleeping than they will about the shame of being overdrawn. They will say, "Pray for me, I've just been under stress lately." But they will not say, "I do not know how I am going to cover the rent, the car payment, the medication, and the electric bill without something bouncing." They will nod at people in the church lobby, stand in fellowship hall with a paper cup of coffee, say all the right words, and never once mention that they have been avoiding their mailbox because they do not want to see another envelope with red lettering on it. They will smile at the cashier or silently praying the card goes through. They will stand at the pharmacy counter feeling their heart race while waiting for the total. They will let calls go to voicemail because one more collector, one more reminder, one more request for money they do not have feels like too much. This is what quiet financial struggle looks like in real life. It looks like pulling the car into the driveway and sitting there a few extra minutes because you need to gather yourself before walking inside. It looks like ignoring the email subject lines you already know you do not want to read. It looks like saying no to lunch, no to travel, no to helping sometimes, then feeling guilty afterward because you are used to being the one who comes through. But hear this clearly. God is not repelled by the part of your life that feels messy, delayed, or under pressure. He is not ashamed of you because your numbers are tight. He is not measuring your worth by your checking account, your credit score, or your ability to keep every plate spinning without ever asking for help. If anything, he moves closer to the places where human dignity feels bruised. He is near to the people carrying invisible burdens. And if you have been suffering in silence, still showing up, still serving, still trying, still believing with tired eyes and a heavy chest, then heaven has not looked away from you. And what made that bank balance feel so sickening was not only the amount itself, but the weight of everything and everyone attached to it. Because for many people hearing this, the pressure is not just personal. You are not just thinking about your own lunch, your own gas, your own medicine. You are thinking about your mother's care, your father's appointments, your adult child who is trying, but the economy has chewed up their confidence and spit out their plans, your granddaughter who needs a winter coat, your grandson who needs help with school fees, your spouse who may not even know how much this is weighing on you because you have gotten used to carrying the emotional load in silence. Or maybe you live alone, and that creates its own kind of pressure because every problem lands on one set of shoulders, and those shoulders happen to be yours. That is why the body reacts the way it does. It is not just lack, it is responsibility fatigue. It is being tired of always being the one who figures it out, tired of stretching every dollar until it almost tears, tired of acting calm in public while your mind is sorting categories all day long. If I pay this now, that has to wait. If I refill that prescription, I need to cut back here. If I help them, I will have to go without this. If I say no, I will feel guilty. If I say yes, I will feel scared. That constant internal math drains a person. It drains joy from the grocery aisle. It drains peace from Sunday mornings. It drains sleep from the night. Because even when your body lies down, your mind is still balancing numbers in the dark. So if you have been feeling tired in a way that sleep does not fully fix, there is a reason. You have not just been spending money. You have been spending emotional energy, mental energy, spiritual energy, all while trying to stay dependable for people who may not even realize what it costs you to remain steady. And God sees that too. He sees the burden of the dependable one. He sees the person who keeps showing up because they love deeply, because they were raised to handle things, because they do not want their family to feel the full weight of the strain. He sees the one who sits in the doctor's parking lot, in the church pew, in the kitchen chair, carrying a whole private world of concern behind a calm face. And what God sees, he does not dismiss. That is why the enemy would love to turn one painful moment into a permanent story of hopelessness. Because once the mind starts attaching fear to the future, the number on the screen becomes bigger than a number. It becomes a prophecy of doom if you're not careful. That is when thoughts start whispering, "It will never get better. I am too old to rebuild. I have already missed my chance. I should have been further along by now. I'm going under. I have done everything I know to do, and it still is not enough." Those thoughts do not always sound dramatic. Sometimes they sound tired. Sometimes they sound reasonable. Sometimes they slide in while you are lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling fan. Sometimes they show up when you're sitting in the Walmart parking lot trying to work up the energy to go inside and buy only what is absolutely necessary. Sometimes they come while your hands are in dishwater and your mind starts replaying every financial mistake you think you ever made. Sometimes they arrive the second the phone buzzes and your body fills with dread before you even look at the screen. This is how despair works. It tries to turn one hard fact into a total identity, one bad week into a permanent future, one low balance into a verdict over your life. But the bank account is not the final prophecy over you. The pressure is real, yes. The anxiety is real, yes. The math is real, yes. But it is still not the whole story. God has a long history of stepping into places that looked dried up, delayed, and impossible. He has interrupted hopeless narratives before. He has made ways in wilderness seasons before. He has provided in households that had more needs than answers before. And one of the quiet deceptions many believers face is assuming that because provision did not arrive in the form they expected, heaven must have gone silent. But silence is not absence. Delay is not abandonment. Pressure is not proof that God has forgotten your address. Sometimes the account is low while heaven is still moving. Sometimes the numbers are frightening while God is already arranging wisdom, restraint, favor, timing, and human help that has not fully entered your field of vision yet. And this is where the story begins to shift, because often God starts by steadying the chosen one before he changes the numbers around them. That first miracle is not always external. Sometimes it is internal, and it is no less holy because it happens quietly. Sometimes the first thing God does is stop panic from swallowing you whole. He gives you enough calm to breathe again. He gives you enough clarity to stop spiraling and start seeing one step at a time. He gives you enough restraint not to numb the fear with another reckless choice. He gives you enough courage to open the envelope, answer the call, ask the question, tell the truth, or finally admit that the burden has become too heavy to carry in secret. And that kind of steadiness matters, because panic makes everything louder, while wisdom makes the path visible. Suddenly you are able to think again. You call the insurance company and ask what your options actually are. You reach out to the church benevolence team, even though pride hates the idea. You ask whether there is a payment plan, instead of assuming there is none. You accept the meal a neighbor offers, instead of insisting you are fine. You look into a part-time position, even if it is not glamorous, because dignity is not found in appearances, but in faithful steps. You sell something in the garage that has been sitting untouched for years. You cancel the subscriptions you kept forgetting about. You tell one trusted person the truth, instead of carrying the whole thing alone like a silent martyr. And little by little, what felt like drowning begins to feel like movement. Not because everything changed overnight, but because heaven strengthened you enough to take the next right step without shame. That matters more than some people realize. Inner steadiness is not a small thing. It is often the beginning of practical rescue. It is the moment the fog starts lifting. It is the first breath after emotional suffocation. It is God saying, "I am here. Now let us walk this through together." Because God's waymaking is often built through very plain, unglamorous faithfulness. One call, one prayer, one honest conversation, one wise adjustment, one refused lie, one act of courage in the middle of embarrassment. And if that is where you are right now, if you are still waiting for the numbers to change, but you can feel God trying to steady your mind, your emotions, your breathing, your choices, then do not overlook that work. It may not feel flashy, but it is sacred. It is the hand of God helping you stand before He helps you rebuild. And sometimes, standing again is the very first sign that the way is already being made. And as that steadiness begins to return, many chosen ones discover that the help of God does not always arrive with thunder, spectacle, or some dramatic interruption that leaves no doubt in anyone's mind. More often, it slips into ordinary American life so quietly that if your spirit is exhausted, you could miss the holiness of it. It may look like your sister calling on a Tuesday afternoon and saying she had you on her mind for no obvious reason, then asking one more question instead of accepting your usual, "I'm okay." It may look like a woman from church pulling you aside after service, pressing a grocery store gift card into your hand and saying, "Please don't argue with me. Just let me do this." It may look like the pharmacist behind the counter taking an extra minute to check for a generic version, a discount program, a manufacturer coupon, some lower-cost option that cuts the total enough for you to breathe. It may look like an old coworker mentioning that their office needs somebody dependable for flexible part-time hours. Nothing glamorous, nothing flashy, just a door cracked open at the exact moment you are running out of ways to stretch the month. It may look like a neighbor who notices your routine has changed, who sees you carrying more than you say, and shows up with a sack of groceries, a casserole dish, a bag of oranges, a loaf of bread, a rotisserie chicken, and the kind of kindness that makes your eyes sting because you had forgotten that provision can wear human hands. It may look like an unexpected refund, a bill extension, a late fee waived by someone on the phone who could have gone by policy but decided to make room for mercy. It may look like a grown child finally waking up to the fact that you have been carrying too much, finally stepping forward, finally saying, "Mom, let me take this one," or "Dad, I can cover that this month." And for the first time in a long time, you feel the burden shift just enough to know you are not holding the whole house up by yourself. This is why you have to be careful not to reduce miracles to only the kind of stories that sound impressive from a stage. Because some of the most life-giving provisions from God are modest, timely, almost hidden inside daily life. Sometimes the miracle is not a sudden windfall. Sometimes it is enough gas to get through the week without the gauge hitting empty. Sometimes it is the right person answering the phone instead of the wrong one. Sometimes it is your electric company giving you a few more days. Sometimes it is the church pantry box that arrives before the refrigerator gets too bare. Sometimes it is somebody quietly paying for your breakfast at the diner, or the doctor's office unexpectedly allowing a payment plan, or the friend who says, "I was headed to Costco anyway, what do you need?" and means it. Those things may look ordinary to somebody who is not under pressure, but when you are the one standing in the middle of the storm, that kind of timing feels sacred. And that is the point. God often chooses channels you already understand, roads you already travel, voices you already know, because He is not trying to entertain you with drama. He is trying to sustain you in real life. He knows you do not live inside a sermon illustration. You live inside a mortgage payment, a medicine bottle, a dented pickup truck, a stack of bills on the kitchen counter, a church calendar, a family group text, a body that gets tired more easily than it did 20 years ago, and a heart that has learned to carry more than it should. So when He makes a way, He often makes it in the language of your actual life. He sends the text message. He provides the referral. He arranges the discount. He gives you favor with the person on the other end of the line. He moves through a sister, a deacon, a friend from Bible study, a former boss, a neighbor across the street, a tax return, a refund check you were not expecting, a small opening that would not impress the world, but is enough to keep you moving. And maybe that is why some chosen ones stay discouraged longer than they have to, because they are waiting for provision to look supernatural, while God is already sending it through familiar doors. There is a kind of humility required in this season, the humility to recognize that God's help is still God's help, even when it comes wrapped in a paper bag, a phone call, a part-time shift, or a kindness that does not make for a dramatic testimony, but keeps the lights on. That humility matters, because pride can make a suffering person miss the mercy standing right in front of them. Pride says, I should not need this. Pride says, I should be able to handle it on my own. Pride says, if God were really helping me, it would not come like this. But grace says, receive what I send. Grace says, I know what you need better than you know what form it should take. Grace says, if I send help through ordinary life, it is still holy. And for many people in this season, learning to receive ordinary provision is part of the healing. It is part of how God teaches the tired soul that He has not abandoned them just because He chose a practical route instead of a dramatic one. And that is when the deeper work begins. Because once help starts arriving, even in these small and grounded ways, the season often starts exposing what has been draining you for far too long. Financial pressure has a way of pulling back the curtain on patterns that seemed manageable when life was looser, but become impossible to ignore when the margin disappears. It starts showing you where your strength has been leaking for years. It shows you the overgiving that came from guilt instead of genuine peace. It shows you the rescuing habit that made you feel needed but left you depleted. It shows you how often you said yes because you could not bear the discomfort of disappointing someone, even when your own account, your own body, your own peace could not afford another yes. It shows you how you have confused silence with strength, as though never admitting need was somehow more spiritual than honesty. It shows you the emotional spending that snuck in on lonely weekends or hard evenings. Those little purchases that briefly soothed something deeper than boredom. Because sometimes, people do not spend money for pleasure. They spend it to quiet pain they do not know how to name. It shows you how often you carried shame from old mistakes and tried to compensate by over-functioning in every other area. It shows you where self-sacrifice quietly crossed over into self-erasure, where helping stopped being an act of love and became an identity built on never having limits. And none of this is being revealed so you can condemn yourself. That is not what God is doing. He is not pulling these things into the light so you can sit in your kitchen and rehearse your failures with new vocabulary. He is revealing them because He is not only making a way out of the immediate crisis, He is making a new way for you to live. He is showing you what has drained you because He loves you too much to restore you back into the same patterns that exhausted you. This is where the message has to move beyond comfort and into transformation. Because sometimes what you call a money problem is also a boundary problem, a secrecy problem, an identity problem, a guilt problem, a pattern problem. Sometimes the financial stress is real, but it is also exposing how long you have been trying to hold together an unsustainable version of life. And that is hard truth. But it is merciful truth. Because if God only patched the emergency without touching the pattern, you might survive this month and walk right back into the same kind of drowning later. So He begins asking gentle but piercing questions. Why do you feel responsible for saving everyone? Why do you believe asking for help makes you weak? Why do you keep spending from emotional emptiness and calling it reward? Why do you feel more comfortable overextending than disappointing somebody? Why do you think being chosen means being endlessly available? Why have you treated depletion like faithfulness? Those questions are not there to humiliate you. They are there to free you. Because healthier boundaries are not selfishness. Greater honesty is not failure. Wiser stewardship is not fear. Less shame is not carelessness. It is maturity. It is healing. It is the chosen one learning that obedience to God does not require burning yourself to the ground to keep everybody else warm.
In fact, one of the most difficult lessons for people in this stage of life is realizing that not every request is an assignment. Not every crisis belongs to them. Not every guilt feeling is the voice of God. And not every sacrifice is holy just because it hurts. Sometimes, holiness looks like saying, I cannot do that right now. Sometimes, wisdom looks like telling the truth before things collapse. Sometimes, stewardship looks like making a budget and sticking to it, even when your emotions want relief. Sometimes, healing looks like letting a grown child feel the weight of their own decisions instead of rescuing them again. Sometimes, faith looks like accepting that you are a human being with limits, not the family savior. And yes, that can feel unfamiliar, especially if you were raised to keep going no matter what, to take care of people, to avoid airing your struggles, to make do, to be grateful, to push through. Many Americans in this age range were taught exactly that. They learned to work hard, keep private pain private, help others, and not complain. There is dignity in that, but if it is not balanced by wisdom, it can harden into a life where you carry everything until your soul starts to crack quietly under the weight. God is not interested in shaming that history. He understands where it came from. He understands the generations that shaped you, the churches that praised selflessness, the families that depended on the strong one, the economic years that taught you to brace for impact. But precisely because he understands it, he also knows where it has become too heavy. He knows where it has kept you from receiving. He knows where it has made you confuse exhaustion with righteousness. And because he loves you, he does not just say, "Here is some help for the bills." He also says, "Let me show you a different way to carry your life. Let me teach you what peace looks like when it is not built on denial. Let me show you what stewardship looks like when it is honest. Let me show you what love looks like when it includes yourself as someone worth caring for. Let me teach your mouth to say no without shame and your heart to receive yes without guilt." That kind of change is not instant, but it is sacred. It is how the chosen one stops merely surviving and starts living in a way that leaves room for peace. And once that deeper work begins, then faith can rise in a more grounded and powerful way. Because now you are not asking God to simply erase discomfort. You are recognizing him again as provider, even when the math still looks wrong. That is the holy mystery many mature believers know, but still have to relearn in hard seasons. Paper has never been the full measure of provision. If life were governed only by what made sense on paper, many of the people hearing this would not even be here. There were years that did not add up. There were months where the paycheck should not have stretched, and yet somehow the groceries lasted. There were seasons of layoff and severance and uncertainty, and yet somehow you stayed housed. There were funerals you paid for, medical scares you survived, family emergencies that emptied the savings, children who needed more than you had planned to give, cars that broke down at the worst possible time, marriages that strained under pressure, illnesses that rearranged the whole budget, and nights when you genuinely did not know how you were going to make it through the next month. And yet, here you are. Not untouched, not unscarred, not pretending it was easy, but here. That matters. It matters because your history with God is not theoretical. It is not made of verses only, though those matter. It is also made of evidence.
It is made of lived-through days. It is made of unexpected openings, quiet rescues, endurance you did not know you had, and mercy that arrived in forms you could not have predicted. So when the math looks wrong now, you are allowed to feel afraid, but you are not allowed to forget your history. The same God who carried you through layoffs has not lost his power. The same God who sat with you in grief has not become indifferent because the problem now has dollar signs attached to it. The same God who provided after surgeries, after heartbreak, after family strain, after seasons of watching everything tighten, is still provider now. He is still shepherd now. He is still present in practical need now. He is not intimidated by late notices. He is not shaken by shrinking balances. He is not up in heaven wringing his hands because your arithmetic feels impossible. Human math says there is not enough. Human math says the window is closing. Human math says the timing is bad, the resources are thin, the odds are narrow. But divine provision has never been limited to the neatness of your spreadsheet. Sometimes the miracle is timing. Sometimes it is wisdom that helps you stop the bleeding. Sometimes it is favor with a person who had no reason to be generous. Sometimes it is endurance that keeps you from making panic decisions that would have deepened the hole. Sometimes it is a door opening that you did not even know to knock on. Sometimes it is process, not instant rescue. But even process can be holy when God is inside it. And this kind of reassurance has to be spoken carefully, because people in real financial strain do not need fantasy. They do not need empty talk that denies the seriousness of overdue bills and limited funds. They need sturdy hope. They need the kind of faith that can sit at a real kitchen table with real numbers and still say, God, I do not know how, but you have not run out of ways to care for me. They need the kind of hope that does not require pretending the pressure is light. They need the kind of truth that can look directly at the difficulty and still refuse to call it final. That is why provider is such a powerful name for God. Not magician, not entertainer, provider. One who sees what is needed and makes a way through wisdom, timing, relationship, opportunity, restraint, and mercy. One who knows the cost of living in a fragile world. One who does not abandon his people to practical need. One who can feed in a wilderness, guide in uncertainty, and sustain through long seasons that make no sense to the natural mind. And if he did not lose you in the other seasons that should have broken you, he has not lost you in this one either. Which brings the heart back to the deepest wound underneath all of this. Because financial fear does not only threaten comfort, it threatens identity. It whispers that if you are struggling, you must be failing. It tells you that if things are tight, you must be forgotten. It suggests that if you feel overwhelmed, you must be spiritually weak. And that lie lands hard, precisely because so many people have tied their worth to their ability to provide, solve, hold everything together, and never need anything from anyone. For years, maybe decades, you have been the one who handles it, the one who fixes, the one who pays, the one who remembers, the one who comes through, the one who stays steady, the one who does not fall apart in public. So when money gets tight enough to expose your limits, it can feel like more than a financial threat. It can feel like a threat to who you think you are. If I cannot provide the way I used to, who am I? If I need help, what does that make me? If I cannot keep all of this together, have I become less than who I was? Those questions cut deep, especially in a culture that praises independence, competence, and self-sufficiency. But chosen one, your identity was never meant to rest on your uninterrupted performance. God's love is not a reward for managing your life flawlessly.
Your worth is not measured by whether you always had enough in the account, whether you solved every crisis alone, whether you kept the entire machine running without ever needing support. You are not a failure because you are struggling. You are not forgotten because things are tight. You are not less spiritual because the pressure has overwhelmed you at times. You are not the one who ran out. You are not the one who messed up. You are not the burden. You are not the embarrassment. You are not the late notice, the declined card, the unpaid balance, the sleepless night, the worried look in the mirror. Your identity is still held by God, and what God holds, fear does not get to rename. This matters because dignity can erode quietly in financial hardship. A person starts apologizing for existing. They start shrinking their desires, shrinking their voice, shrinking their presence, as though lack has made them less worthy of space. They stop reaching out. They stop participating. They feel ashamed receiving kindness. They feel embarrassed saying no. They start carrying themselves like they owe the world an explanation for every limitation. But God does not ask his children to wear shame as proof of character. He restores dignity. He speaks to the human being underneath the fear and says, "You are still mine. You are still loved in this kitchen, in this line at the pharmacy, in this church pew, in this aging body, in this tight month, in this humbling season. You do not cease to be chosen because the numbers got frightening. If anything, this is where you most need to remember who you are. Not to become arrogant, not to deny reality, but to refuse degradation. To refuse the inner collapse that says your value rose and fell with the balance on a screen. To remember that while the account may reveal your current condition, it does not reveal your eternal worth. It tells you how much money is there. It does not tell you how much grace is there. It tells you what is due. It does not tell you what God can still do. It tells you the limit of one category. It does not tell you the limit of heaven. So return then to that opening image. Return to the quiet kitchen, the phone in your hand, the coffee cooling beside you, the morning light coming through the blinds, the moment your stomach dropped and your face changed because the number was smaller than your peace could handle. Yes, the fear was real. Yes, the pressure was real. Yes, the account balance shook you. But God was there too. He was not absent from that kitchen. He was not silent in the panic. He was not turned away by the tears you tried to blink back before the day began. He saw you trying to plan the day while your chest felt heavy. He saw you still getting dressed, still showing up, still carrying life on tired shoulders when part of you wanted to shut down. And he is still making a way. Not always through fantasy, not always through instant relief, but through wisdom, provision, people, timing, strength, and doors you cannot yet see. The balance may be low, but heaven is not empty. The numbers may look frightening, but God is not out of options. You are not abandoned, not disqualified, and not finished. What feels impossible today is not beyond the reach of God. He is still making a way.